Yeah, we can. It's loading, I think.
Yeah.
And then Upanda, if you can close your camera, then I'll open mine. But it's still loading, yeah. Perfect. Everyone, a very warm welcome to the Water Pavilion, Water for Climate, #Water for Climate. What we are going to speak about today is digital inclusion to enhance climate resilience. The next slide, please, Upanda. So let me share with you the agenda before I go down to giving you an overview of the presentation. So the first presentation will be by Upanda Udalagama from INI, who will be providing an overview of the contentious and relations between digital inclusion and climate resilience, but also opportunities. And she will also be introducing you all to a new project that IMI leads on the very same subject titled Doing Science with Society. This is followed by a very exciting panel with the following persons: Lisa Debbie Beck, who is the Gender and Social Inclusion Lead at the Global Water Partnership. We have Asel Mursa Kulova from the University of Central Asia's Mountain Societies Research Institute, and also co-founder of the analytical club Mongu, which I'm sure she will speak about. Indika Arulingam, who is a researcher at IMI and also the co-author of the 2021 high-level panel for expert report on youth and agriculture. Then we have Mayank Jain, who's co-founder of a membership-based farmer producer organization in Bihar, India, which has 60% more 60% women as their members, with a special focus on youth and minorities and marginalized communities. And Mayank is going to be talking about social inclusion and digital innovations in the organization that they lead, which is called Sumarth. Then we have Doris Adem, who is an energy analyst with a focus on emerging technologies. Doris is having some problems connecting, so hopefully she will be on board. We keep our fingers crossed. Following this, and of course your contributions and your feedback, we end with a wrap up by Michelle Neck from Stanford University, former IMI, who's really triggered some really interesting insights on social inclusion and digital innovations. And finally, the last word by Alan Nicole, who's Director, Water Growth and Inclusion at IMI. So let me just set the context for the presentation and the rest of the session. Upanda, the next slide, please. Thank you. So, for sure, the agriculture sector is experiencing a lot of challenges relating to climate, relating to urbanization, transitioning economies, moving to other sectors, etc. Poverty, inequality, gender, you name it, it's all there in the sort of basket of what makes for how do we get food security addressed, and especially how do we look at water security in the context of so much unpredictability, too much water, too little water at the wrong times, etc. But one of the challenges that's really key and perhaps less talked about is about who's going to grow our food in the future. So, the global age for farmers across the world is around 58 to 60 years. And there's an enormous amount of analysis which shows that new generations, the youth, are not very interested in farming. The next slide. So A report that was done by IMI, and we produced a blog post on this, shows that climate impacts are a major driver of youth pull-out of agriculture. But as this report also points out, this blog and the reports associated with this blog post, that climate is a major driver, but not the only driver of youth pull-out of agriculture. There are so many different types of pull and push pressures that are resulting in youth pull-out of agriculture across the global south. The next slide. So in the face of this challenge as to who's going to be farming in the future, the question that's often posed, or even sometimes, the solution that's presented is that climate smart agriculture or digital innovations in agriculture is the silver bullet to attract youth to agriculture. So is this really true? And this will be a first question that we'd like to hear your feedback on. So here you have the Menti link and the code, which we will also post in the chat so you don't miss it when we move away from this slide. We would really encourage you to post your response to this question. Is climate smart agriculture the silver bullet to attract youth to agriculture? So that we can get a conversation started with you, with all of you as we move ahead. The next slide. So what's really interesting in this high-level panel expert report on youth and agriculture that my colleague Indika Arulingam, who's on the panel, was a co-author, was that, there are many different types of challenges that really impact how youth engage with agriculture. First of all, are intergenerational relations and realities, and land ownership, or even the ability to really make decisions on resources is something that is not available, not accessible to youth in many different social contexts. It's also about aspirations, it's about mobility, it's about the geography, it's about so many different issues that is resulting in youth pull out of agriculture. The next slide. So the fact that technological innovations are presented as solutions, but are they really the silver bullet? And and I ask this question because a lot of the technological innovations that are presented as climate solutions, as climate interventions, are presented as solutions. But then often the solutions that we are offering might not really fit in with the problems, different contexts in different settings, the different challenges that different groups of diverse, heterogeneous youth experience in very different social, political, economic, and ecological settings. So we, a couple of us were working on these issues, take away the message from Kentaro Toyama, who's been really working around these issues and has some really interesting publications on this, where he says that, our reliance on solutions really distracts us from understanding what really matters and what is the problem. So can we use technology also to really try and understand the problems? The next slide, which is my very last slide. So which is the question that I would like to leave you with, the second Mentimeter question. So in the HLPE report, it was identified, which as I also discussed, that the reasons that youth are moving away from agriculture is complex and consists of many different issues and challenges. So the question that we want to really ask you is that, can technological innovations also address some of these structural youth agriculture challenges? And do you know of any such innovations? So we'd really like to hear from you. With this, I welcome you once again to this session, and I hand over to my colleague Upanda for the next presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deepa, for that introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is such an honor to start off this session, especially on this Youth and Empowerment Day. As a young woman who is starting out her career in the development field, it is wise to get the lay of the land, understand what I'm really getting into. Who will I be interacting with on the field? Why am I choosing a specific population to focus on? What sort of tools will I apply to collect data? And how will I assure the information that I have collected can be translated into transformative outcomes and empowering solutions? And funnily enough, all the answers to my questions revolve around the idea of digital innovations. So today, I want to take the time to question my questions, brainstorm the extent that digital innovations can reach in a time that the world seems to be getting warmer, wetter, hotter, and drier. And also, at the same time, place myself, a member of the youth community, on a pedestal and emphasize that I am the most powerful agent within this room right now, and that the importance of digital innovations will not be fulfilled without the inclusion of the youth population. Within the previous centuries, brilliant leaps have been made, resulting in digital technology to be at the center of the fourth industrial revolution. We have advanced sensor platforms, AI, blockchain, the Internet of Things that are transforming and influencing all spheres of life across the water, food, energy nexus. In relation to an Earth that has now reached a stage in which populations are impacted by climate extremes daily, it is vital that we have access to quick, real-time feedback in order to support individuals to brace for impact. And this is possible through digital interventions. Through real-time data collections, we're able to model climate risks that are then transcribed to provide us with patterns. The most relevant examples of climate modeling being found in the latest IPCC report. We're able to use technology for climate change transparency, specifying countries to report on their progress and keeping them accountable to their promises. There's more collective engagement involved, such as youth, in mobilizing together through digital technologies with the aim of tackling climate change and developing a greener digital system. And also, there's a lot of worry that digital innovations can exacerbate deep-rooted inequalities, but there are also examples of digital technology precisely addressing these inequalities. Technology on its own is not going to do any problem solving, but with the right intention and objective, that is what makes a difference to whether rooted inequalities persist. These are precisely the reasons why this digital journey is so exciting, as it holds so much promise. Through digital expansion, we're bringing the world to people's fingertips and speeding up change. We're transitioning into digital systems that can enable adaptation to the climate crisis by switching to renewable energy sources. And with the focus on farming systems, new ways of accessing and using data can enhance producer capacity and support stronger producer-consumer relationships, pushing farmers to become more engaged within the market systems. Actually, Maya and Jane, one of our panelists today, have been creating this type of maximum impact, right? By giving farmers the opportunity to decide when, where, and how to sell to consumers while they earn a sustainable income. We look forward to talking with them. And even more importantly, digital technologies have helped farmers become more aware of how climate change impacts their surrounding environment through the use of climate services, like weather indexed insurance schemes and disaster warning systems. But with such great expectation, it is still quite strange that technology doesn't benefit everybody. referring to a post written by our very own Deepa Joshi, in which she cites a 2013 article by Alberta Alicida. It illustrates the invention of the plow during the Mesopotamian era of the 3rd century BC, and how such a mechanization of agriculture led to persisting patriarchy. Still today, with the plow existing in many of our societies, these gender divides persist, as described in this 2020 study by Amita Kumari. By looking at individuals to societies where the plow was historically used, elements of the patriarchy were stronger compared to culture that didn't have the plow at all. It goes to show that a tool is never just a tool. It holds the power to sideline a gender to be weaker and to establish a greater prevalence of attitudes that favor gender inequality. We can also look at the Green Revolution and how technology may have reshaped agriculture at the time, but it still had instituted historical inequalities. Through subsidies for mechanization that aggravated land and profits for larger farmers, marginalized smallholders were excluded from receiving the benefits, and therefore inequalities persisted and became more widespread. Therefore, is there a fear that patterns of the past will be repeated? Are digital innovations too good to be true by only favoring the majority, mainstream groups of society? Asking such questions leads up to our focus on youth, as there's a lot of hope being pinned on us with the expectation that we can transform food systems and lift communities out of poverty. It is projected by 2030, 20 million youth will enter the labor force on an annual basis, with agriculture and food system being the largest employer, particularly in the global south, where climate change is creating the most detrimental challenges of all. But young people today have become quite detached from traditional agricultural systems due to generational poverty and marginalization, resulting in their aspirations not matching with their livelihood realities. So, what is shaping youth aspirations? What is shaping their pull away from agriculture? Can digital innovations be used to lure back youth who are leaving agriculture? And additionally, is it wrong for us to assume that all youth will be a fan of digital innovations? Trying to answer these questions makes us recognize that youth are not a homogeneous group. Due to our geographies, both biophysical and socioeconomic, we are all located within different technological grids in different parts of the world, and therefore our space and scope to apply digital innovations vary, and it depends on how advanced our country is. It's also about considering the intersectional social dimensions that one is surrounded by. Can a young person afford to use such tech gadgets? What about the necessary training and education needed to understand what digital innovations they're holding in their hands? Do they have the necessary mobility to access these knowledge and skills? Digging deep into these contested spaces makes us ask if we're really placing social inclusion at the heart of designing digital innovations. To move forward, we need to think outside the box, flip the situation, and design ways to overcome inequalities rather than reiterate them as it has historically been done. This entails allowing more vulnerable groups to be participants of the design process rather than just observers. And coincidentally, an email-led research project titled Doing Science with Society intends on doing just that. With the aim of assessing climate vulnerabilities in Bihar, India, we apply a digital ethnographic tool called SenseMaker to capture many experiences and stories, to analyze how groups experience climate risks, and understand the factors that enable their resilient strategies. Through SenseMaker, we're making the most marginalized be heard and understand how climate challenges intersect with other social injustices, such as gender, class, sexism, racism, and so on. Additionally, we use SenseMaker to enable reflection by key institutional stakeholders to share how and why the climate strategies they implement in the first place tend to be exclusionary. And lastly, we'll bring all those voices together and jointly design bottom-up climate strategies that will build the resilience pertaining specifically to the marginalized populations in Bihar, as there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout this brief presentation, we have questioned the questions surrounding the capability of digital innovations in creating transformational change within the climate change arena. Whether such an aim is possible depends on how inclusive we intend to be, and if you choose to reverse the hierarchy that allows exclusionary measures to persist. And most importantly, there needs to be more meaningful, empowering engagement, bringing in women and youth, not just because they're a check mark on your inclusion list, but because their voices matter. My final comment to you is this: the young generation owns the future of the planet. I mean, your generations have had your fun during the previous three industrial revolutions. Let the fourth revolution be ours. Thank you. Before we move on to our panel session, a gentle reminder to please fill in the Mentimeter poll. The link is in the chat, and please fill it in during the process of the session. All right, let's go in. Let's drive on. Building up on this excitement of digital innovation, it is my pleasure to introduce the panel for today's session. Our distinguished panelists range from diverse geographies, bringing with them valuable knowledge and unique experiences. Therefore, it's such a privilege to be able to moderate this session. So let's dive right in. Starting with Lisa. Lisa, you bring to the table 20 years of research experience as a social anthropologist, working in sub-Saharan Africa with a particular focus of social inclusion in the water sector. While being based in Burkina Faso, you created a conceptual socio-hydrological model of an interaction between people and water quality. Given that context of working within a space where you've already implemented digital innovations to visualize how water and social systems are interconnected, what do you see as the most significant barrier to digital innovations and exclusion in achieving change for the most vulnerable and marginalized? And please provide examples of your pioneering work in Africa. Over to you.
Thank you, Upanda, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So yes, when we talk about barriers to digital innovation and social inclusion, and it's great to follow on your wonderful presentation as you've raised a lot of these issues already. The barriers are really a complex set of elements that intersect in ways that cannot be untangled easily, if at all. But I would say that there is one word that encompasses all of these barriers, and that is access. It's the access that people have to knowledge, to decision-making power, to resources, and these resources could be financial or others. People who are vulnerable and who have been marginalized within their social setting are often less educated, at least in formal ways of education. They have limited access to informal trainings and formal trainings. Their voices, and we should not forget, these people have a voice, but they're often not heard or listened to in the spaces where decisions are made. It could be due to their age, to their gender, social status, and religion. So all these different intersectional aspects of inclusion that are key for understanding the obstacles to true inclusion. Now, participation in digital innovation requires technical equipment, and often the most vulnerable, the most marginalized populations do not have access to this due to funds, because a lot of times this technical equipment may cost a lot of money. So we may develop models, and you mentioned this socio-hydrological model that I worked on together with socio-hydrologists from University of Vienna. And the challenge we had is that often the programs that are used for the development of such models are not available even to the technical experts in some of the countries where we're working. So for example, when we worked with the river basin authorities in Burkina Faso, they didn't have access or didn't have training in that particular modeling. Those models were not available for free, or they were not able to run it on the poor computer equipment they had. So, and that's even at the sort of the urban or high level of the regional stakeholders. But when we think about the rural areas and the farmer population, I mean, again and again, I've seen situations where even having people having a mobile phone, a working mobile phone, and that's the important component, because I think that a lot of times we talk about mobile phone coverage increasing around the globe just based on the statistics of how many people signed up to take a SIM card, right? But is that SIM card actually then activated properly? Is it working with a mobile phone? A lot of times women will use the mobile phone that belongs to their husband, so we can only access them through the husband or through the permission of the husband. Or maybe they don't have network. Very, very often electricity is a basic access issue that we face. There are areas where we worked in rural Uganda, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, where people have access to electricity only for an hour per day. So how can we expect them to be up to date on all the latest digital technologies when they can't even charge their mobile phone? So these are really basic challenges. And so understanding the access challenge is the core to the solution, in my opinion. The digital innovators should really be exposed to the conditions of these rural settings and understand the immensity of these challenges. They should be exposed to the conditions. They should look for solutions that are both affordable and suitable for the context, and suitable both in terms of social norms, such as the belief that young people or women should not be involved in decision making, which is still the case in many countries where we work, to more technical and structural obstacles, such as lack of electricity, lack of funds, lack of network, or limited access to investment. Young people can often not get a loan from the bank because they don't have anything to sign that loan against, or any guarantor. So I believe that while the situation is complex and challenging, if investors are interested in working in this space, I'm sure that if we work together with the vulnerable and marginalized in these contexts, in a collaborative way of co-creation, really considering their needs and their challenges, that we could find sustainable and innovative solutions. But it really has to be that kind of co-creation, not just participation for the sake of participation. We don't want to just consult the stakeholders, tick the box and move on. We really need to engage them in this process, and through that co-creation, then we can find the solutions that are inclusive and sustainable. I'll stop there and hand over back to you, Panda. Thank you.
Well said, Lisa. Well said. I think, what we see most often is those that are most affected are not even included in the conversation, right? As you said, not giving a seat at the table, or just not considered to be vital to the conversation. And with that lack of network, agency, and as you rightly said, access, those who are marginalized will continue to be pushed back, which is, very distressing today. So thank you, Lisa. Asel, I come to you. Building up on this theme of achieving greater equity, it is becoming quite apparent that digital transformations will evolve only when the rights of the most vulnerable are recognized and are seen as agents of change. Referring to your research, which studies the issues along the Kyrgyzstan-Tajikistan border, you are a key spokesperson for advocating for the voice of young people who are affected by the current issues along that border. Coming from such a conflicted region, what have been the barriers to digital innovation and inclusion in achieving change for the most vulnerable communities from a remote location? Over to you.
Thank you, Panda. The barriers to digital innovation can vary greatly from region to region and depending on various levels of technology diffusion. I would like to discuss a specific of mountainous countries. Mountainous countries are known to have vulnerable ecosystem to climate change, and simultaneously, due to the complex topography of these countries, building any infrastructure, including digital, is expensive and technology complex process. For Central Asia case study, we can see that these barriers are following. The first is the low network coverage of remote regions that is depending on the altitude and coverage of the road and communication infrastructure. Innovation penetration can have a large gap between different parts of the same country. The second, innovation is underdeveloped due to slow growth of economic. Statistics show that agricultural sector is reducing its share of GDP in Central Asian countries. Thus, digital innovation is concentrated mainly in the service sector of urban centers, in contrary to the rural areas. And third, unstable institutional environment. For example, in Kyrgyzstan, the authorized body responsible for the promotion of digital innovation disappeared, and reappeared in the structure of the government during 12 months. Therefore, it is important to understand that digital innovation is promoted in a specific infrastructural ecosystem where roads, network coverage, economic growth rates play a crucial, complex role. I will stop here and will hold to you, Vanda.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Asal. I mean, interesting, right? It's always reassuring to see the connections between answers, such as you and Lisa, which emphasize the importance of institutional structures in bridging that gap between the uptake of technologies and, well, the inability to have any access to these necessary resources. As you said, without a functioning road, the lack of mobility hides away populations from having access to knowledge, information, and other vital services. So thank you, Asal. Right, let's zero in. Let's zero in on the spotlight group of the day, which is the youth, and how to publicly empower them. I believe that as a demographic, the young people are expanding globally, but at the same time, youth unemployment remains to be quite high. This results in young people seeking alternative strategies such as migration out of livelihoods in their agriculture, and it becomes such a huge concern for smallholder farming and global food security. I mean, Indica, your research into looking at youth participation in small-scale fisheries, aquaculture, and value chains highlights the transition in which if youth are constrained by socioeconomic or political factors, such as not having access to land, financial resources, or being left out of the decision-making circles, they are inhibited from scaling up to new opportunities. So therefore, after being implemented and being access to kind of research platforms, do you think digital technology can help bridge these youth challenges, such as engagement with agriculture? Over to you, Indika.
Thank you, Upanda. So as you very correctly mentioned, there has been a lot of interest in the recent past on the topic of youth engagement with agriculture and food systems. However, solutions for engagement or re-engagement of young people tends to frequently take a paternalistic approach of young people and their needs, such as being youth-specific interventions that are largely atomized from the inequalities that determine how young people might be able to engage with agriculture for their livelihoods. So when we talk about youth and digital innovation together, we should be cautious about essentializing young people as individuals who are more innovative or entrepreneurial than other age groups, for whom livelihoods in agriculture can be developed simply through digital innovation fixes. For instance, while young people appear to be more capable than older individuals when it comes to ICT capabilities, there is no clear evidence to support a direct relationship between age or being young and a higher propensity for innovations. So any attempts to fix youth in agriculture through digital innovations first requires us to consider whether agriculture is first able to offer productive and rewarding livelihoods and fair incomes for young people. Many youth start building livelihoods in agriculture from a position of less resource endowment and power. They typically have less access to assets, including land and water rights, finances, and knowledge. They have to fight to have their voices heard in decision-making spaces dominated by the patriarchy, as we are witnessing today in the COP26 negotiations. And these constraints are, of course, become even more acute based on other intersectional identities such as gender and class. Digital technologies have the potential to address some of these challenges. For example, the internet can enable young people to circumvent some of the more exclusionary aspects of knowledge access, such as the financial and physical barriers of attending research and educational institutions based on socioeconomic status or gender. It also provides spaces for young people to be knowledge creators and distributors in their own right, altering generational power asymmetries in who gets to create and provide knowledge. But of course, all of this will be shaped by digital divides, as discussed by Lisa earlier on. As with all technological change, the potential risks and benefits of digital innovation and to which groups these accrue depends entirely on the context of application. As food systems become more capital intensive, assets, resources, and profits from input provisioning to food distribution are increasingly consolidated with fewer hands. There is increasing concern that digital technologies, by enabling new forms of control and value extraction from food systems, for example, through the extracting and analyzing of large amounts of data, will further accelerate this trend, with implications for farmer autonomy and further deepening inequalities between farmers. However, being aware of these differences can help to expand how digital technologies support inclusivity in agriculture. There are several promising examples of how digital innovation, especially when accompanied by social innovation, has significant potential for democratizing what technologies are developed, by whom, and for whose benefit. One example of this is Farm Hack, started by the Greenhorns, an organization of young farmers in the USA. Farm Hack is a web platform where designs for the development and repair for farm tools, machinery, sensors, and other technologies are shared using an open source or Creative Commons approach. These are made available and editable by other members of the community, thus providing a platform for farmer-to-farmer learning, collective action, and greater choice and control by farmers over the technologies that become available to them. Another example is a sensor and cloud-based environmental management system for agriculture, developed by volunteers from YAL IT Hub, a youth-run startup accelerator from Sri Lanka, an application that they adapted for local conditions and which was made available for farmers at affordable prices. So in conclusion, young people are not waiting around passively for youth-friendly interventions for re-engagement with food systems. Within the very real challenges they operate under, they are attempting to build livelihoods in food systems, influencing the course of agricultural transitions, and at times, by doing so, even impinging on the power imbalances that constrain them. So when we talk about digital innovations and youth engagement in one sentence, there is an urgent need to go beyond paternalistic approaches and recognize and work with young people as equal and active participants. I'll stop here. Over to you, Panda.
Thank you, Indika. I mean, you're right. After hearing your insights, youth aren't waiting. We want to get on the go, but it's also important to consider that without actually having access or accumulating the necessary resources such as training or education, the youth are left at such a disadvantage because they possess such limited knowledge and skills. But think about it. They aren't able to adapt to climate change risks because they're decreasing their familiarity with traditional agroecological knowledges by moving away from agriculture, and it worsens the situation even further. A lot to think about, a lot to digest. Thank you, Indika. Mayank, you are well aware of this situation, how inequalities can become more exacerbated when they intersect with other vulnerabilities, such as climate change risks. As a social enterprise, Sumart serves the most marginalized smallholder farmers in Bihar by integrating technology and ensuring sustainable recurring income for the communities, providing end-to-end solution from the field right into the market arena. Based on your value chain model, are barriers to more inclusive technological innovations due to knowledge hierarchies, value-driven attitudes, or simply because of lack of access to digital tech and services? Over to you, Mayank.
Yeah, thank you, Panda, for this question. So I'll just begin my response by giving you a brief background of where we work and what we have seen over our work in past years in the state of Bihar. And we work in one of the least developed districts of India, where special emphasis is on agriculture. So when we talk about how India has developed and how we have taken the primary sector for granted, if we see, agriculture has always been a way of life for people as well as a source of livelihood. So it was also a cultural thing and a business opportunity at the same time. But while we were moving towards tertiary and secondary sectors, we often neglected the primary sector, and there has been erosion of values. So now, how I see and how I perceive these things is that we are making amendments to our entire thinking and whatever erosion has happened, and we are bringing digital inclusion or digital solutions as one of the solution, where we talk about bringing glory back to agriculture, or addressing issues like climate resilience, or doing climate smart agriculture. Now, for me, particularly, I think it's a mix of all these things, the knowledge hierarchies, the value-driven attitudes, and it's also about access of digital tech and services. So I will just give you some examples. So in past 7 years, we have worked with 9 different startups. We have helped them in deploying their solutions on ground. And yes, accessibility and last mile connectivity is a biggest challenge, especially most of the apps and the kind of things what we are doing right now, they are not available in vernaculars. That is also creating a problem, and it requires a huge infrastructure, especially the Indian farmers and the entire ecosystem is right now under technologized. And the land is fragmented, and there is a very strong nexus of politics and economics at the ground level that needs to be understood. So I will give you another example. It's a very good policy move which has been made by Government of India and has been implemented in few of the states, which is about National Agriculture Market. And it talks about farmer is free to sell his or her produce anywhere. But what is essentially happening, despite all these measures, farmers are not free to sell. Why? Because they have already taken money from the money lenders in their villages. The traders want price opacity, and there will be more transparency. Digital solutions are occupied, and everybody is trying to fetch more profit or more money from this entire value chain. And that is also one of the barriers which is happening right now. Despite that, ENAM is one of the flagship programs right now in India, and I'm very hopeful that it would be highly successful as it brings more transparency to the system. Again, in digital inclusion, so there has been a lot of emphasis on farmer producer organizations and formation of collectives right now by the Government of India. And in India, agriculture is a state subject. So states are also emphasizing on creating these things, and their collectivization is happening and everything is happening. Then farmer is getting more bargaining power. So I think these are the things what is happening right now. Now coming to knowledge hierarchies, what I have seen, the kind of solutions which are we getting right now, there is a total disconnect, especially with the policymakers as well as the technologists who are designing these solutions without actually understanding the domain. You can't go about things. And especially in agriculture, where there is a different microclimate and hyperlocal things which are there, it needs to be appreciated. So it also becomes a function of cost, and it needs to be well tackled. So I think it's a mix of all these things. And each factor has its pros and cons. But to have a more inclusive technological innovations, I think we have to just focus on core of things, and which could be leveraging the existing infrastructure what we have in India, and then gradually moving towards more radical transformations which are happening in terms of blockchain or more money transparency and addressing different issues in value chain. Yeah, over to you, Panda.
Thank you, Mike. As you rightly said, at the end of the day, what do we want? Transformations. We don't want them to just be on a checklist that they know they've just produced something. We want them that their livelihood security to actually develop from something better, from something that was worse to something much better. And last but not least, Doris, you're creating waves within the energy sector in Ghana, having committed yourself to promoting sustainable energy initiatives within the country. Your research of looking at Ghana's electricity market, evaluating the country's changing generational mix from hydroelectric to thermal power production is all quite thrilling, as you're providing a spotlight on this era of green energy. And this prompts me to ask, how can digital innovations, including new forms of e-mobility, help create more inclusive outcomes towards achieving our climate targets? Do you have any country experiences to share? Any challenges you've encountered on the ground? And most importantly, how can we scale up to fit with the current times? Over to you, Doris.
Hi, everybody. My name is Doris, and good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. I hope you can hear me, and I hope you can all see me as well. On the 3rd of November, here at COP, the United Nations Secretary General launched the SDG report, and part of that report was a team part of the report on technology and data, which I was very privileged to be part of, to work on. And I can say that I just want to take a bit of quotes from that report, because that report was launched alongside all the global roadmap for the accelerated SDG. And in that report, I mean, as much as we spoke about innovations and the digital revolution that is coming as a wave all across Africa and here, we were able to pick out key principles which we need to be able to follow in terms of our digital innovation that would actually make us close the gap. It's all about closing the gap. Before I come in to talk about some country experiences in Ghana, and then take us through a bit of the challenges and how to scale it up. To certain the ambitions, it has to have a certain vision and be in line with the achievement of the SDGs. I mean, and to be able to integrate sustainability into it. We both know that a lot of innovations come about, a lot of digital innovations come about, especially within Africa and around the world. But as a result of when it's launched and can't be sustained, we just have it in a couple of months and then that's the end of it. But we need to have innovations that are able to be sustained in order to have an impact on us. And to be able to also do that, we need to be able to act locally. That was one of the main pointers of the report, to act locally and to leave no one behind. I will share the report later with Upanda, and she can share with everybody on this call as well. But in being able to act locally, we need to be able to customize some of our technological digital innovations that we have within the country. You know, I would use this to launch into an example from Ghana, something called Smart Farm. There is a way you can actually farm in Ghana without actually owning a farm. There's a way you can farm without going to the farm, yet you can earn profit from the farm that you'll be farming on. You may actually even have the farm without seeing the farm ever in the first place. And so I wanted to be able to talk about that. Smart farming is just an innovation by a couple of young people, youth within the country, who come up with a way to it's also with the idea of co-opting people, right? So you co-opt money in this case, and that money is what is used to run Smart Farm. So you can actually sign up with $100, $200, any amount of money, but it's just coordinating resources from individuals worldwide. And it has almost 1,000 people sign up now, and most of the people who sign up are workers and students. Again, back to the youth and what we have to do. And what it has brought into bear is how you can farm by just being on your phone, literally, and being able to link your bank account to the farm and being able to pay. So over the time, what these people have done is to be able to benefit both the farmers and the people who are putting the money on board. I sign up, other people sign up, then we all bring the money on board, give it to a farmer, make sure that that is also monitored. The farmer gets his produce, sells it off, more of a co-op nature. You get money and bring it back into the people who brought the money back to you. It's more like going on the stock exchange and trying to buy stock on the market and getting profit. This time we're buying stock on the farmers market. So this is one digital innovation that has been able to bring farmers the money, the needed funding that they deserve, and being able to bring the innovation locally and getting the people within the land to support that. So aside that, in terms of e-mobility, there is a young individual in Ghana coming up to do what we call e-bikes as a form of delivery network. So you've got electric bikes. So because as she said, I am big on sustainable development. I'm big on clean energy, on clean transport, and everything that has got to do with having a sustainability angle to it for the future. So when it comes to this person having e-bikes, he not only is going to use electricity to power his bikes, right? But he's going to now use those forms of two-wheelers to do delivery networks, give jobs to the youth, and in so doing, create it with an app on your phone. So when you are actually wanting to call a delivery driver, you're not just calling any delivery, you're calling an e-delivery, more of it, because you're getting an e-bike to do your delivery for you. You are also contributing towards bridging the gap in order to be able to get to where we want to get to achieve our climate targets at the end. So basically, in leaving no one behind, we have to be able to understand that, yes, there is a digital divide. There is an issue of affordability. There's an issue of capacity development, which we have all said in various forms this morning. There is an issue of existing technologies that are being underdeployed. So we have to be able to bring all the technologies to bear. And when individuals come up with various innovations or digital innovations, as we have seen, as I've just explained to you, in terms of smart agri and in terms of e-mobility being used as a smart delivery mechanism, it also shows us that the youth can come up with things. But if we do acknowledge the digital divide and we do acknowledge that there is an accessibility issue and technology issue, then we can be able to build the capacity of the people to get to do more. Because from what they have done, from what others are doing, from what so many others are doing, we can scale up. But we cannot scale up if we don't actually acknowledge the challenges that are ongoing and how we can be able to use those challenges, transform them to tools that can allow us to scale up. In terms of the digital divide, I don't want to so much talk about it as much as just to say that when we want to come up with innovations these days, innovations that are being born through the phone more than through the laptop, especially for Africans. Because for all those who've worked in Africa, you'd agree that there are more phones for the youth than there are laptops. I stand to be corrected, but every youth has a phone and mostly can access the internet to some extent. In some areas, yes, there is that digital divide in terms of the technology itself or in terms of getting internet access. But if we have phones, then we are able to attract every young person to be able to use a digital means to connect around the world. And that is how we bridge the gap, to be able to start from the phone, not necessarily just a laptop, but understand that it can start from here. And then when we're scaling it up, we can scale up from here into another way. Because I want to emphasize exactly on the acting locally and the homegrown innovations. The homegrown innovations are very important because when we grow it at home and we are able to show what can come out from where in Africa, then we can actually have partnerships across the world, not just donors, but partners. So if I have something in Africa that I grow, like the smart agri, that works well, if Alan far away somewhere in the world also sees that this is an innovation that can grow and be able to bridge the gap, he comes in to partner. He partners at homegrown innovation, and that helps us to scale up. In the report somewhere, it was, we actually made a proposition to the UN that they set up what we call a platform, more like a comprehensive global assessment of innovations. More that was a bit geared towards the energy innovations, but we were saying that when we have a global platform that can bring together all innovations and programs that can help us to learn from a collective place. So when you go to that platform, you'll see all the innovations that are coming across the world, in Africa, wherever, in Asia, Southeast America, wherever you see the innovation, you can be able to also see, I want to go into this, I want to scale up this, I want to partner with these people. And in partnering, we get to scale it up, because innovations as innovations is not enough. It has to be sustained to be able to have an impact. And for it to be able to have an impact as well, it has to be that kind of innovation that we can scale up into a bigger approach, because there is a big nexus here. Every innovation that we come up with, every digital platform that we come up with, of course, there is a nexus here. We have a Greek, and there's a nexus to technology, there's a nexus to water, and the nexus to the farmers. So we know that there's a connection. And in that way, we are not only maybe tackling SDG 2, hunger, or tackling SDG 6 or tackling 7 in terms of clean energy for the e-mobility delivery, but we are tackling so much more sustainable development goals. And that is how we bridge the gap to be able to move forward. Thank you so much.
Brilliant, brilliant, Doris. Thank you. Right, this is what this session is all about, right? To show that while there may be challenges in creating a more equal environment, in the way people interact or interface digital tools, there are also some big wins to celebrate, in which there are intelligent ways being undertaken to use technology to its full capacity. Wow. Thank you, my esteemed panelists, for contributing your valuable time and knowledge to this session. And it's been a pleasure conversing with you from all around the world. With that said, I'm going to hand it to my colleagues, Michelle and Alan, to provide us with a final rundown. Over to you, Michelle. Over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Upanda. And thanks so much to all of our panelists. I learned a lot, and I'm really struck by kind of the two different sides of digital inclusion that we saw emerge today. On the one hand, there's this question of who has access to digital technologies. And Lisa mentioned how gender dynamics affect who owns a mobile phone. Also talked about the institutional environment. We heard Mayang talk about how infrastructure is important for last mile connectivity and the associated costs of that. And beyond who has access to using digital technologies, Upanda went a step farther to say who has access to designing and developing these technologies, who has the digital skills and the resources to actually make decisions about how they're built. And I think these questions really go a long way in shaping the second side of digital inclusion that emerged today, which is how can digital technologies create inclusive benefits? And to this point, Upanda also mentioned how tech won't solve anything on its own. We need the intentions there. Indica talked about the importance of context specificity. Doris mentioned the commitment to sustaining digital tech use, acting locally in homegrown innovations. And Deepa mentioned how tech is often framed as solutions, but we want to make sure we're addressing the right problems. So I guess I'm left kind of thinking about how we can center these intentions, these this nuance and these commitments as we're building and implementing digital technologies. And Alan, I'd be really curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. firstly, thanks to all the participants, wonderful discussion and rich and challenging at the same time. I was struck by something Deepa said at the beginning. Don't let solutions distract us from key problems, core problems that are maybe invisible, difficult to see, or even problems that are, in plain sight, but somehow we don't want to tackle them. Are they wicked problems? Are they too difficult? But they go to the heart of points that have been raised by all the panelists, that there are structural power inequalities out there. There are problems of access to basic services, Lisa mentioned. There's remoteness, Asal mentioned. There are huge institutional challenges here. The instability in institutional environments, Asal also mentioned, which is critical. So how far are the institutional environments, the power structures essentially out there, hindering or not the capacity of youth to engage in what Upanda calls the fourth industrial revolution, this enormous transformation that we're seeing in front of us, and that is central to the climate change agenda? Because we, as you hear in COP in Glasgow, the call is for enormous structural transformations in economies. And with those, of course, come enormous social transformations. And part of that is this incredible digital revolution, which has the capacity to change things, or has the capacity to enable change in the right direction, perhaps. But at the same time, there are huge structural inequalities in the capacity of youth. And again, picking up on Indika's point, we mustn't essentialize youth here and imagine that all youth has access to technology and to digital innovation in the same way. Of course they don't. So there are huge differences, huge ranges in abilities to engage in this sector. But it's essential that structural transformation takes place in order to achieve the goals we have to tackle climate change. And in doing that, we need some major structural inequalities to be dealt with. So institutional environments, access to power, seizing, in a sense, capacity to change as youth, seizing the reins of change and moving forward those processes is absolutely critical. And I think it was mentioned in the discussion, what kind of protocols need to be followed. Doris, you mentioned it, in fact, in the recent report you highlighted. There needs to be a kind of set of principles here, a set of protocols, ways of thinking about how to take this forward, an agenda, in a sense, for youth to push for inclusion, to push processes themselves as agents of change. And I think those protocols perhaps could be something to think about going forward, and really articulating them very clearly from a youth perspective. So youth doing it for themselves and identifying what are the goals, what are the processes to bring about this more equitable digital inclusion, and therefore being part of this enormous transformational change that is required to meet future climate goals, or indeed current climate goals. So I think there are some incredibly powerful messages in this meeting, and I'm really glad that these points came out on such an important day when the focus is on youth, the focus is on that sort of transformation from below. And I think we should take those forward. We should try and articulate them and share them more widely. So with that, back to you, Upanda, and back to youth.
Thank you, Alan. Just before we close this session, we want to go back to the Mentimeter polls that everyone took part in. Thank you for participating in that. Deepa, do you want to handle this and try to bring us into a closure? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Hi, Upanda. Yes, I can do that. So I think we don't have very many comments, but I think these are really interesting insights. So the first one, if we talk about farming on the ground, yes, if we talk about value chain, indeed, I think, for a very long time, all of the technological innovations, especially in agriculture, including within the CGIAR, have been really being focused on farm and ground level interventions. And I think it's only increasingly that we are really focusing on value chains. And I think inequality and youth challenges, employment, etc., are really critical also across value chains. Upanda, the screen is missing from my, okay, it's back again. Thank you so much. And indeed, somebody says, depends on the location. Exactly spot on. I mean, we're talking of very different digital divides, not just in the global south, but including in the north as well. I think President Biden's one-point agenda when he was elected recently was to bridge the digital divide and gap between different geographic locations in the United States. So I think that says a lot about the digital divide everywhere. And I really like this point about not in isolation, but with a more holistic systemic approach, and also possibly built around stewardship of land and water. Indeed, I think, we are all talking about a green revolution 2.0, but I think we are also hurtling down unconsciously many times along the same pathways of blinkered, siloed interventions and approaches that led us into the realization that a systemic change is required in making agriculture more inclusive and sustainable. So I really like this comment, which I think the last one talks about, again, context-specific agroecologies. It is connected with the image of future and modernity. And I think I find this very interesting because then I go back to what Upanda and maybe Indica were talking, that we tend to imagine and assume that everybody's aspiration is about futures of modernity. And I think Indica's research points out that this might not be the case, because even the ability to aspire is shaped very much by intersectional inequalities. And at the same time, there's also a lot of youth around the world who are sort of focused on reversing the trends of modernity. And I think to some extent, I think the whole approach of sustainability in agriculture and the Green Revolution 2.0 is also taking some sort of a stand. So yes, it depends what we define by modernity. Modernity as related to what? Is it just blindly technological, or is it technological with a real focus on looking at nature society relationships and respecting these nature society relationships? So with that, I would like to close. I would like to thank, there's the second one. Should I go through that? Is there time, Upanda, to also look at the second round of comments?
Unfortunately, there is no time. But thank you everyone for participating and being part of our session today. I wish we had more time. We have a lot more to talk about, but maybe next time, COP27, right? So thank you everyone. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our speakers for taking time out of your busy schedule, especially around the world, to be here today. And if there's anything, please, we have our emails in the Pathable platform. So please contact us if you have anything. Alan, Michelle, any last words to say? Madhika?
Just a big thanks from me to everyone, and do watch the recording or share the recording with your colleagues and friends so that they can also partake in the conversation, or at least listen to the interesting thoughts that were shared.
Perfect. All right, thank you everyone. Have a good day, morning, evening. Take care, be safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.